Colorado mushroom farm. So, although you guys have new farms now, they're doing very well for you. So, I am really delighted to be able to spend a little time with you today and explore some interesting things on our planet. You saw a little teaser there from, almost 20 years of my career. In case you guys aren't up to date on what I'm doing, I have my current series is called Ocean Mysteries, and that is broadcasted every Saturday on ABC stations. It's a very popular show. We travel the world and we look at what's happening to our planet's oceans. And if you're into the social media stuff, my Facebook is Jeff Corwin Connect. You can check out this giant fertilance viper I was milking 2 days ago in Costa Rica. But today, I was kind of thinking what we could talk about, what we could explore. And I thought it would be interesting if, in addition to unraveling the things that I do in the field, if we could spend some time talking about where we are today on our planet with species, and what are things we can do in our lives to make a difference to protect species. And as that video alluded to, we live in unprecedented times when it comes to life on Earth. A lot of people don't realize that in the 45 minutes, an hour we'll spend together today, 2 species on our planet will have disappeared forever, which is quite surprising. And when you add that up, that means we are losing more species of life than we have since dinosaurs disappeared from our planet 60 to 70 million years ago. But the difference between that extinction, and this is not the first time life has been eclipsed on Earth. We've had almost 5 different times where life has faded off and come in some sort of crystallization. But the difference today, unlike those previous extinctions, is that unlike dinosaurs, where the cause of that was an asteroid slamming into the Earth, we are the asteroid. Through our behavior and what we do to our planet, we are causing life to disappear very, very quickly. And what's so shocking about that is we are a pretty darn smart species, and we can do something out of the tens of millions of different types of life forms on our planet, out of the hundreds of thousands or 1.2 million vertebrates, out of the thousands of different mammal species, we can do something that very few can do. And we're the only ones who can do it the way we do. And that is, we understand the reaction to an action. You understand that if you smoke cigarettes, it's probably not going to work out for you 20 years from now. We understand if you don't wear your seatbelt and you hit something, that reaction, that impact literally will be more severe had you not. You know, if you pull a baby bird's nest out of a tree or you cut a tree and there's a bird's nest in it, and those birds don't know their future. They don't know that their life comes to an end within minutes. But you know that you've cast and pushed forward that domino, and that effect will happen. I bring that up because we know when we do negative things to our planet, there will be a result from that. So, which is to me amazing. Like if I told you, if you guys walk out that door, a building's going to fall at you, you wouldn't walk out that door, you'd walk out that door. But because of our behavior, we're losing species. So what is the behavior we're doing? What is it? And so I was thinking about this, and I think for me, Have you ever read the book A Perfect Storm? Great book, crappy movie. Written by Sebastian Unger. And it's about a boat right where I live. In fact, I went to college with one of the guys who was killed on that boat. It's the Andrea Gale, and they head out to sea and they encounter a perfect storm. And that perfect storm puts them in a position that no matter what they will do, they're going to die. Doesn't matter what the maritime, their seaman skills, they cannot survive and they're going to perish. Because that storm is perfect, not in its beauty and its elegance, it's perfect in its lethality. All the elements have conspired to put the hangman's noose around that vessel. And I want you to think of that term, perfect storm, because I look at our current extinction crisis as a perfect extinction storm. But before I get into that, I thought I would just dabble a little bit in my own journey of where I am and what I do. And, you know, I think you watch the stuff I do on TV, and sometimes I think people get a false impression of who I am as a person. You know, my mom isn't Jane Goodall and my dad isn't David Attenborough. I grew up in a very regular family. My dad is a retired Boston police officer and my mom is a retired nurse. And for a long time as kids, we lived in an urban environment and there was no nature. And I craved nature as a child. And when I was about 6 years old, we were at my grandparents' house that lived in a more rural environment. I wouldn't say wild environment, but just more rural. You know, like a place you'd see in Colorado, outside Denver, farming area. It was Middleborough, Massachusetts. My grandparents lived in a manufactured home, which is a fancy term for a mobile home, I think. This is very nice. And they had a little backyard, and one day I was in that backyard, and I saw something I had never seen before. It was about this long, it was legless, and it was scaly.
Snake.
And it was coiled on a stump. And I started shaking. I still shake when I see these things. I still get excited. And just when I went to check it out, it just melted and disappeared underneath the log, and I panicked. I thought I had discovered this thing that no one had seen before, and I lost it. So I started digging through the trees and the dump and all this material, and literally as I'm getting close to it, the tail just disappears. And then finally, you know that, I don't know if you've ever had a wood pile, but you know, there's always that layer that you never use, and every year it gets more spongier and rotten. And I was down to that layer, and just this sponge of log with all the white little tendrils of roots and old spider web, and there it was perfectly coiled like that. Kind of had a little stare-off moment, and I just instinctively grabbed it. And it instinctively reached back and grabbed onto me. And I walked into the home of my grandparents. My grandmother, Chickie, was sitting in her chair, I think drinking a Fresca and probably smoking a Pall Mall. And there's this thing hanging from my arm. And she looks at me and she goes, "Get rid of it." And my grandmother, you know, rest her soul, she is a terrific lady. She's a bird rehabber, but she was one not to be trifled with. She was, you know, up till she passed, in her presence, like stigmata, I'd get the canker sores in my mouth in preparation for the soap I was going to eat for something I shouldn't have said. And so she said, "Get rid of it." And I went, "No," like that. She said, "Why not?" I said, "Because I love it." Get it off my arm. So my dad pried this garter snake off my arm. We checked it out, and he said we should probably let it go, and I let it go right where I found it. And if you know anything about snakes, you know that they are creatures of habit. They're very specific to where they live. And we developed a truce, me and this garter snake that I named Gladys. And I would frequently visit her and study her, and she would frequently hang out in that same area basking. I learned about all sorts of things. I learned about ecdysis, that miraculous process when they shed their skin and they're bright and shiny underneath. And you can see how they become the symbols of medicine by that almost renewal-like event they go through. I learned about reproduction, when one day I see that she's popped her head up and all these amorous little garter snake heads pop up around her, and she has traveled perhaps a quarter of a mile, leaving this trail of pheromones, and these amorous males have moved in to connect with her and breed with her. And they'll entangle around her. And only one, the most driven, genetically hardwired snake to breed, will fight that maelstrom of garter snakes to get to her. And then he breeds with her. And that same snake that produced these chemicals of invitation produces a chemical of repulsion and drives the other snakes away. Not unlike that marriage can be sometimes in his own way. And it's funny, I revisited that. My daughter was like 3 years old and I was filming somewhere remote. And my wife called me up and said, "Your daughter just found all these snakes." And I said, "Oh my goodness, don't let her." I said, "I don't know if they're venomous or not, so don't let her go near them." So I went there. Sure enough, it was garter snakes and they were in a breeding ball. And my daughter looked at me, she says, "Hey Dad, you know what they're doing?" I'm like, "What?" She goes, "They're snuggling." I went, "Yeah," and I go and watch some TV, get away from this nature crap. So I learned all about life from Gladys. And that moment with that garter snake really set me on course to do the things that I would do for the rest of my life. The job I have today was based on my experience with Gladys 41 years ago. I know, you thought I was going to say 15 years ago. But the most important moment for me with Gladys was I was about 8 years old. So 2 years of watching this snake. And I was sitting there making little sketches. And all of a sudden there was chaos. And I looked down and I saw the back end of Gladys was wielding pathetically, while the front end was biting into the air. And it just slowly tapered down. And I looked down and the head had been severed from the body. And I couldn't make heads nor tail, literally, from the situation. And my view expanded to reveal the next door neighbor of my grandparents with the spade in his hand. And he had decapitated that snake. And it was at that moment that I realized that good people make bad decisions because they lack information. When I first saw Gladys at 6 years old, that's when I knew for the rest of my life I'd be a naturalist and work with animals. At that point, I knew I would be a conservationist, and that was the difference, because I felt people needed information to make better decisions. And that put me on the road to do what I do now. And of course, we've had all these great adventures and all these great experiences. And I was trying to think of an animal that kind of laced all my life journey in TV. You know, it's been 10 TV series, almost 20 years. And the animal that really came to mind was, I think you probably would assume I'd say snakes, because I've done so much snakes. But it was actually elephants. And that, I saw that picture and I said, those creatures have been a part of my life, and my best days and my worst days. I've had great moments and terrible moments with elephants. And I remember the first time I saw a wild elephant. We were in Borneo. This was the pilot episode for the Jeff Corwin experience. And we were filming. And we had come after hours of trekking through this stifling hot jungle. We came across the 40 last elephants in Borneo that lived in this herd. And it was the coolest moment because we discovered that even though we've been looking for these elephants for hours and hours and hours, that they were with us the whole time, often never more than 50, 60 yards away from us. So here we are slashing and complaining and moaning and groaning, and these elephants weighing thousands of pounds each, probably 150,000 pounds worth of elephants, never once snapping a twig. And I remember, I was working with my friend Pierce, who was the cameraman at the time. We're always playing jokes at each other. So, like before we were in Africa, and that cheetah moment with the cheetah, and I remember I stumbled on, Pierce is a great guy. He really cares about his craft, but he's the perfect cameraman for me. He's good eye, good focal points, understands, telling a story, and he's about 40 pounds overweight. And we were hanging out one day looking for cheetahs, and I'm just happened to walk through this Namibian shrubbery called the bushveld, and boom, a cheetah popped up 10 feet away. It scared me and scared the cheetah. And the cheetah started getting upset, and I'm like, kind of doing the "you must smell my cat" thing at home, backing up. And Pierce is, 100 feet away filming me, and he starts laughing. I'm like, dude, what's so funny? I'm like, back, back, back. And he goes, "Oh, Jeff, you can't outrun that cheetah." And I said, "No, but I can outrun your fat ass in about 2 seconds. Have another crawler." So, Pierce and I were in Borneo, and I would go by, and, they had leeches. I don't know if you've ever seen a real leech. The leeches are incredible creatures. They're underappreciated, but they're the most perfectly designed animal. They will sit on the tip of the drip tip of a leaf. And they will sense the presence of warm-blooded animals going by. And they'll wait for that perfect moment. And when they started, these are tiger leeches. They're about the width and length of a broken piece of sharpened pencil, about that long and not much thicker than a couple of paper clips. And they will do the ultimate leap of faith, like jumping off the building. And they jump, and they'll aim right for your sock. And they'll tumble into your shoe. They pass through your sock without tearing a fiber. And then they attach onto you, and they have this, almost like a little drill, and they drill into your skin, but they produce an anesthetic, so there's no pain. And then so you don't even know what's happening, and they produce an anticoagulant, so there's lots of blood. And that tiger leech, that's about 1/2 inch long, engorges to about 3 inches by 1 inch, and weighs about 2 ounces, so it's significant. So I would snag a handful of these leeches, and I just put them all in Pierce's left boot for fun. I would frequently stop and do leech checks, and I'd be like, "I got one," so I'd be like, "I got one," and you hear Pierce go, "Oh!" It had like 35 leeches, and his alley-oop giant feet were shrunk down to like Japanese Princess Mina's 12-pound foot. So we finally find these elephants, and it's so quiet, and all of a sudden, all hell breaks loose because the elephants have their babies, and they don't want us there. And every time we try to get away, they drive us towards them. The adolescents push us towards the bugling moms, and we couldn't get out of that situation. So it went from this amazing discovery to chaos to terror. Because we'd run through the jungle and suddenly, they're being pushed, literally being pushed around, and it was getting dangerous. And I worked with this kid, Bill, and Bill was about 29, and he was just starting in the business, and he was a PA, a production assistant on our shoot. And he told me early on in the trip, he said, we had 6 weeks of India, Thailand, Borneo, Malaysia, Indonesia. There's going to be lots of snakes and bugs and camping and creepy crawlies. For me, fantasy. And after we filmed a couple of days, Bill pulls me aside and says, hey, Jeff, can I talk to you? I'm like, yeah, what's up, buddy? And he goes, I just figured something out. I said, what'd you figure out? He says, I hate animals and I don't want to work with them. And I was like, what an odd career choice for you. Being we're about 4 days into 6 weeks of work. So I knew he was going to be trouble. So Bill was so scared that here we are, and it's 98 degrees with 100% humidity. He's got a flannel shirt with duct tape around the sleeves, rubber gardening gloves, rubber boots, like a Ray Bolger scarecrow hat on his head. And we're in this maelstrom of elephants, and I hear this sound. I hear the elephants are screaming. I hear this. Like, what the heck is that? And I didn't say heck. And I hear it again, and I look over, and I'm like, Bill? He said, what? I said, are you crying? We don't cry when we make nature movies, unless something's giving birth or being eaten. What is up? He goes, I got tears in my eyes. I think I said, you're crying. And as I'm getting mad, and he starts huffing and puffing like my 3-year-old does. And I'm like, stop it. And the more he does it, the more angry I am as he's hawking. And I'm like, stop it. And then finally I went, Bill, you are acting like the first person who gets killed in this horror movie. So that was my first elephant experience. My second elephant experience, well, there's been many, but a memorable one is we were in Africa and we were filming baboons. And the Range Rover was parked in a berm, and I crawled down about 100 yards towards these baboons, and they wanted nothing to do with me. But as I'm trying to talk about them, I hear behind this forest of acacia, I hear this distant bugle. And I was like, oh, look at the camera. I'm like, guys, we just heard an African elephant. He said he's probably gonna smell us and we'll never get to see him. Well, 30 seconds later, we heard another roar, and it was even louder. I'm like, oh my goodness, it sounds like it's getting closer. And then all of a sudden, there was an explosion of vegetation, and this bull elephant came charging out. And I was like, oh my God. And I remember the park ranger telling us that if we get charged by an elephant, to look at its ears. If the ears are out, it's a bluff. If they're pushed to the head, it's a charge, and you're in trouble. And he said, but whatever you do, do not run. He said, you don't run from a dog, you don't run from a bully, you don't run from a bull elephant. And I see him charge, and he stops, and I scream back at the crew. I said, whatever you guys do, don't run, hold your ground. And then he backs up like that. I'm like, good, he's going away. And then he goes, like this. I went, but his ears were out, and I was like, don't run, whatever you guys do. And then I see the ears go back, and I look back, and I see my crew just running away like that. I'm like, that's what happens if you run from a charging elephant. I was just waiting for like 30 feet of intestine to be pushed in my underwear, and he just goes shoom, right by me, and he charges after them. And I'm like, see, that's what happens. And then they jump in the Range Rover and drive off. I'm like, where are you going? And the elephant kind of goes after them for a little bit, and I'm thinking, like Jurassic Park, is the object closer than it appears in the mirror? And I'm sitting there by myself in this wild area, and the baboons, and all of a sudden are coming over, and they're like, well, you're not so tough now, naked ape, what are you gonna do? And I swear to you, 3 nights before, at our camp, a guy was killed and eaten by a lion. If I was at a bar and I told you, you'd be like, this guy's so full of it, but I could show it to you on TV. So. And I'm thinking of all these things, so I just run in the woods and I kind of hide behind a tree. Just kind of wait for someone to come find me. And I hear the vehicle back up, and I hear this guy, Mulder, yelling. He's like, Jeff, are you all right? Like that South African talk thing they do. I'm like, yeah, I'm kind of okay. And he goes, whatever you do, don't move. I'm like, well, that's not good. That's like, whatever you do, don't jump. I'm like, and then all of a sudden I see 2 tusks come beside the tree and begin pushing the tree. That elephant had come back. I didn't even hear him. And I kind of dashed to another tree and to another tree, and eventually that elephant lost interest and moved off. And I come on, I'm furious and I'm elated, and I talk to Pierce again, of course. Like, you guys just left me to die. And he's like, well, you didn't. I'm like, well, I coulda. I'm like, wow, man, that was intense. He's like, yeah, it was crazy. I said, will you roll? And he's like, I rolled in the whole thing, dude. I'm like, oh my God, we gotta watch this. So we go back, pop it in the VCR, back then, pop a couple of Tuskers, hard ciders, and sit down and watch it. You see me, and you see the baboons, you see these vegetation, and you see something gray, and you see, could be elephant, could be an alien abduction. And then you see his giant feet like this. And then you see an angle of a rosary hanging from a mirror in a car. And that was my first elephant from Africa. The last elephant story I'll tell you about happened around that time. I'd been married for a couple of years at that point, and we didn't have a family yet. And I was working at the Daphne Sheldrick Elephant Orphanage. And they had all these elephants that they had taken in. And they all shared one thing in common. They were orphaned because of poaching, which is still a huge problem. The black market trade of wildlife is a $20 billion a year industry. It's second only to the narcotics and gun trade. And Ivory was driving these elephants to extinction. Also, conflict between, poor people who are trying to survive and elephants that want to eat their corn. It's a big issue over there. So, they had all these baby elephants. And no matter how well they tried to take care of them in the veterinary care, they had an unacceptable amount of mortality amongst the babies, the calves. They finally figured out the formula, but they still had a lot dying. And one day, they figured it out. They could increase the survivability to almost 99+% by doing one thing, and that was to sleep with that elephant at night, touch it, be close to it. Literally, a mother's love saved these animals. So, we were going to do that story. So we went out with the guy who took care of the elephant, and that finally was my big turn to go to bed. And I bed down with, a 3-month-old, 3-month-old, probably 400-pound African elephant named Raji. And so sitting there, and this fumbly little elephant, and I'm so excited, and then the elephant is kind of on me like this, and I'm like, this is so cool. And, I was very conflicted, because half of me was so ecstatic, because I thought, how many guys from Massachusetts are being spooned by an elephant right now? And the other half of me had a complete stroke from being spooned by a 400-pound elephant. So we kind of drift off, and then in the middle of the night, I feel this pain, and it's like wielding